Hi, let me say hello to you to the third lecture in History of Architecture and Structural Design, Form and Space. And today I'm going to talk about domes. Have fun, hope you can learn something, and we see you in 2 weeks again. Thank you for your attentions. So I'd like to start again with a summary of what we talked about so far. We saw some theorists like Marcus Vitruvius Pollio and his ideas on architecture, his reflections on architecture and the three qualities of what he demands on architecture, the utilitas, firmitas and venustas, the utility, stability and beauty. Yes, I'm introducing you to those guys because they were both. They were theorists and they were practitioners. They got reflections on what they did, and also did Gottfried Semper. Well, first you have to read this, what he's talking about, the clothing. You have to read this as a metaphor. But on the other hand, you see on the example he gave us with the Caribbean hut and the difference between the primary construction, in this particular case out of wood, and the enclosure, there is a different. He saw the patterns of what the people used to do, and so this is something else like textile. So he makes a difference between the primary construction and the enclosure. And you asked in the Q&A about the installation. This is included, so to speak, but in further theories you have to think about the difference between the primary construction. Could be out of brick stones, could be out of wood or steel or concrete, and the layer upon that makes you, so to speak, independent in what you're thinking about the facade. So you can give the facade another form than the wall beyond, and the only thing that is, so to speak, negotiating from the inside to the outside are the doors and the windows. So this is so far to this theory. I think we'll come back to this idea of the facade being a border, being something which divides the inside from the outside. It's, so to speak, a membrane between inside and outside. So this is for architecture. The facade as the limit of space means a lot. So I think we'll come back to this in later lectures. The second lecture we jumped, so to speak, into the practices of the ancient Greek architecture, and you can see that it mostly is based on the construction or a structural architecture based on beams and on columns and on beams. So the walls actually are edited into the gaps between the columns and between the beams, so it fills in something and makes the difference between the inside and the outside. Yes, I showed you more the sacral architecture, the temples, and I showed you also the all-day architecture, but the temples are a really high culture of building in this particular case, so it could be read as also as a principle of building. Yes, talking about world exhibitions, I would recommend you to go to the World Exhibition of Architecture, to the Venice Biennale of Architecture, Biennale dell'Architettura. This year you can go there up to the 21st of November, so there are some days left. And I brought you an example from the Biennale in the year 2018. Yeah, the Swiss architect Valerio Olgiati points out in his contribution to the 16th Biennale of Architecture in Venice about the spaces in between the columns, for example. And if you remember the Greek architecture, you see the distance between the columns are very important. Sometimes it's filled up and filled in with walls, but sometimes it's open. So Valerio Olgiati reminds us on this space in between. Well, the Architectural Biennale of Venice has two components. First is the main exhibition, and Valerio Olgiati was part of this main exhibition, but in the same time the countries are having exhibition on its own. For example, the Vatican counts on as a country on its own, and in 2018 they had a competition to design a new chapel, and the 10 architects which delivers contributions to this small competition, they have to orientate themselves on the so-called forest chapel, Waldkapelle, designed by the Swedish architect Gunnar Asplund. You see it on the picture down on the right. Asplund designed it in the year 1940. And Sato Demura found a very, let's say, simple but impressive idea. He had some blocks of stones, and so he created a very simple but impressive space just with these blocks. As you can see, he just formed an inner space, let's say a holy space where you can pray. It's a simple form to divide the inside from the outside, and then he took two other blocks of stones to cover all, to give the roof, but it didn't fill in everything, so the light can come in and shine a light on the altar at the end of the room. So you have shelter under the roof, you can have shelter from rain or from sun, and you can have a look at the lighted backside of this space, and you can pray. So I will come back in further lectures. I will come back to more examples of this exhibition, because it was very impressive to see how architects found a very simple solution to define architecture and to define space. So coming back from the statements of architects in world exhibitions on architecture, coming back to our summary, well, then the next topic was the Roman architecture, and well, the Romans really copied a lot of the Greek architecture, but they also contributed very interesting thing, and this is the arc of a half circle bow, and the art to combine these arcs and the row to design buildings. So the wall became more important in this kind of architecture than it was in the Greek period. So the Romans had the capacity to design very long water supply road, like the Pont du Gard, which you see in the picture on the left, or the Colosseum, which are really new buildings. And the last issue we touched in the last lecture was about Gothic architecture, which is more or less a more mystic and sacral architecture. Here another contribution to the 16th Biennale of Architecture by Elizabeth Hotz, which shows the relation between the Gothic architecture and nature and the tendency of vertical construction, because the very important issue is the pointed arc, pointed as a parabole, and offers the architecture more transparency, so to speak, the resolution of the wall, and to open the wall and offer more transparency to architecture. Transparency and light, as we saw in the film Cathedra by Tomek Baginski. So Gothic architecture is really a mystic architecture. I think you remember that. Today's lecture is about domes, or about private skies, if you like. So I'd like to show you not only an epoch of architecture, but a type of building going through the centuries, changing a little bit the meaning, but not so much. Yes, let me start with this picture, with this image. People in Europe in the Middle Ages thought that the earth was a plate and the sky was something like a dome on the top over this plate. And if you come to the edge and if you put your hand outside the dome, then you have to be afraid, as you can see on the picture. Nevertheless, architects and builders try to build artificial skies, so to speak, artificial domes. So when we go back to the Roman architecture, and if you take a look at the right side of the slide, you see the half circle arcs. I told you was one of the speciality of the Roman architecture. And if you take a look at the pictures in the middle at the left side, you can see if you combine both, so to speak, in the third dimension, then you build a dome. And down at the page you see an election of the Pantheon in Rome. It was a Roman temple, but it was one of the first Christian churches. If you look carefully, you can see that in the elevation there is a full circle, which is built the geometric substance of the Pantheon. These are pictures I took when I was in Rome a few years ago, and I just collected another more detailed evaluation of the building, and you can see that there is a hole, a circle hole in just on the top of the bow, and you see a very strong a strong ring going around this. This is necessary to like the forces, because it's a really huge space. The Pantheon has a diameter of 43.4 meters. That is still amazing, and it's constructed with walls which are 6.5 meter thick, and the opening in the center on the top of the cupola with the width of 8.2 meters. Well, you might say so many numbers, but imagine this is a very interesting thing. Just imagine 43.4 meter in the diameter. It's a long time. No building could achieve the same structure, and that's a very amazing thing. And the thickness of the walls also, I just made a ground plan. If you take a look at the building, the picture on the right up, you can see these walls are so thick that you can have some niche and some corners and something else. You might imagine your bathroom maybe or just a row house is smaller than these walls. So these are really big dimensions. But we don't just talk about constructions and dimensions. Well, this is an amazing dimension, and I choose this example to show you something to copy or to inscenate something like a sky. And if you take a look at the hole in the center and you see the effect it takes, this is not an accident, it's not by accident. This whole architecture is, so to speak, a solar clock or a solar calendar, a solar agenda. There are marks in the wall so you can read the time and the period of the year in the building. So take also a look at the wall. They are more than a limit of space. They are spaces on their own. Well, the dimension of the building are not by accident that big. And if you take in account that you can read something which is happening on the sky and you see the dimension of the space, you can say there is the sky is staged, or the world is staged in this building. And this is a really important basis for the Roman temple to image the world. And it was no accident that the Christian church made this building as a central building for the Christian religion in Rome, and in that time Rome was the center of the Christian religion, of the Christian church. So in a way Rome was, so to speak, the center of the world in that time, and the Pantheon was built at AD after Christ. Well, you might know that the Christian religion had big troubles in the 3rd century or 4th century. They were divided, and a big Caesar, Constantine, he went to Byzantine and founded the East Roman Church. So this is a very important date in history, but we're not doing too much history. We're just doing architecture history or history of spaces. So we should take our point of view to Byzantine. Today the city is called Istanbul. And Constantine tried to mark this this very importance of the city with a huge and monumental building. We call it today, it's still called Hagia Sophia. You perhaps heard it in the news recently. It was founded as a Christian church, the Hagia Sophia, the Holy Sophia, Santa Sophia. Yes, before we go into the details of the building, I'd like to remember you that Rome and also Byzantine at that time were a high dense city, and there were narrow streets and a lot of people around. And if you enter a space like in the Pantheon or in the Hagia Sophia, you have a really wide space and a huge dimension, and it's a high space, and on top you have the cupola, which is something like a sphere. So you may be surprised when you come inside the room and take your view up into the vertical. So the dimensions of the Hagia Sophia are also big. You have just a diameter of 31 meter. It's almost 10 meter smaller than the Pantheon. But the height is also impressive. It's a 56 meter high. So, and if you take a look at the construction, we have, so to speak, a half bowl on the top, which is the dome, and then we have half circles to construct and to be altogether. It's a rectangular ground plan. We have four mighty columns which are undermining this construction. Yes, it was built in 532 and until 537 after Christ, and it's still existing. Let the building collapse, so they had to rebuild, and then they just stronged the pillars and the forces you see on the top on the picture. On the right, you see the huge walls which are saving the copula. But altogether we can consume that this building is still a Roman building. It is where you see the traces of the Roman architecture, but it was a long time the biggest church in the European world at that time known. Everybody knows, in 1453 Mehmed the Conqueror conquered Byzantine, and he established the Islam as a leading religion. He allowed the Christians to hold their religion, but the Hagia Sophia became a mosque. But Mehmed didn't just establish the Islam. Byzantine, now Istanbul, became the capital of the Ottoman Empire. But they didn't tear the church down. They just changed it into a mosque. And I will come back to it later, but just to say, in the 1930s, the Hagia Sophia became a museum, and now it is a mosque again, but they were made excavations, and you can see the whole history of the building. I think you can still see it when you go there. At the top of the copula there was a huge image of Jesus Christ, and let me show you how it works when you come into the church and rise your head and your gaze up to into the dome. Of course, you can see Jesus Christ because in Islam images are not allowed, and but these mosaics and fresci were not demolished, but they were just covered by a small surface of plaster, and so they 1 and 2 pictures could be restored. But the many were covered by plates with surahs of the Quran. So until a few months, the Hagia Sophia was an important church, and it was a mosque. Now it's a mosque again, and I think it is also still allowed to visit it and take a look at these images. See them because they are still just temporarily covered by textiles during the praying hours. Well, in Istanbul you can find a lot of old Byzantine churches which had been changed into mosques. Not only the Hagia Sophia, also the Küçük Hagia Sophia, which is now a mosque, and there was the Kora Church, which became the Carrier Jama. Later, also in the 20th century, it also became a museum, and we have a picture of the big dome in the center down, and in the middle you can see an image of Jesus Christ. On the right you have again the view into the dome, into the cupola of Hagia Sophia, and on the left there is a reconstructed image of one of the important angels. Well, this is an image of the Hagia Sophia being a mosque. Well, it was changed into a museum in the 1930s, and as I said, is it now again a mosque? Here we have some images from an architectural guide of the year 1913. So at that time it was still a mosque. But the Christian religion is also very present in Istanbul. You see it on the picture down on the left. Istanbul is still the capital of the Orthodox Christian Church, of the Greek and the Armenian or the Bulgarian Church have their center still in Istanbul. Yes, let us stay for a while in this very amazing city, and let's take a brief view on the mosques. The very important architect of the Ottoman Empire, Mimar Sinan, realized in Istanbul. Well, he lived from 1490 to 1588, so this epoch was called, in the center of Europe, it was called the Renaissance, and Mimar Sinan realized a lot of mosques, but he was also responsible for the profound buildings like bridges or the fortresses of the army. So he was also a member of the army and was advisor to the Sultan of these constructions. And the mosques he built, they form still the silhouette of Istanbul, what you can see on the picture up on the left. If you take a look from the Golden Horn south to the historical peninsula of the city, the former Byzantine, then you can see still the silhouette of his amazing buildings. Unfortunately, we can't go deeper in his work, but we can say that he was orientating himself on the huge building of the Hagia Sophia, which became the most important mosque of the Ottoman Empire at that time. So this was the relation he gave, but he wants to be perfect. He wants to optimize the system of the half bowls or the bowls, and in the geometry of the building he was really a master, a genius. And he achieved that all these mosques are still stable and survived all the earthquakes, and you can see that he also uses the circle and the bowls and the half bowls and the quarter bowls just to stabilize the construction of the cupola and the minaret beside it. But the origin of this form with the cupola and the minaret was the Hagia Sophia and the cupola of this building. Well, he was not trying to make a new record of the diameters, so he was just concentrating himself on the construction, to optimize the construction. And for example, the Mimar Sultan Mosque has only a diameter of 20 meters. Remember, the Pantheon is about 43.4, and the Hagia Sophia is 31 meter. And well, it's worth to go deeper in the work of Mimar Sinan, and you can find a very, very interesting thing. For me, this architect is, let's say, the most important architect of the Renaissance. But he was in Istanbul at that time, in the east. In the west, other things happen. We come to it in a few minutes, but let me point out that the spaces in the mosques of Mimar Sinan are very special, because he is insinuating the light, the mystical atmosphere, just in a completely different way as in the Gothic churches, because it became a very special space. And he's not staging something to say something. We have an artificial sphere or another. So when we take a look at the huge now, the central dome, the central church of the Catholic Church, and we take a look at the cupola. The dome was designed by Michelangelo Buonarroti. Well, Michelangelo was, so to speak, a coeval of Mimar Sinan. He lived between 1475 to 1564. And, well, he didn't design the whole cathedral, but he designed the dome of St. Peter. Yes, and I would like to recommend him, if I can, to go to Istanbul and take a look and make researches on Mimar Sinan's constructions of domes, because I think he was not that capable to do. He just want to achieve a dome which is in the elevation is a half circle, and but the construction below is not as mighty and exact and precise as we saw it in the mosques of Mimar Sinan. And at least he had some problems with the construction, because the half circle allows just not only vertical forces but also horizontal forces. But Michelangelo tries to break even the record of still holding the record of the Pantheon, and he made a diameter of 42.34 meters. It's not really the diameter of the Pantheon, but almost. And of course, at the same time, he tries a little bit to copy the Pantheon. In these images, you can see the analogy to the Pantheon, with the hole in the center, and the light coming through, and the light is focused on this thing. So this cupola, this dome, is also something like an artificial sphere, and this motif became a very important motif of the Christian churches, and the cupola were built in these particular building type. Well, one who made it better than Michelangelo was Filippo Brunelleschi in Florence, when he constructed the dome of the Cathedral Santa Maria del Fiore in 1418 to 1434. When you take a look at the sections and on the ground plan, you see that Brunelleschi just uses the parable as a principle of construction in the same manner we saw it in the Gothic architecture. So the background is that you just have vertical forces, and you're protected for the horizontal forces, And that makes it very much easier to construct a dome. And he also used the octagon in the ground plan. But Brunelleschi didn't make just studies in geometry. He made interesting models, what you can see in an amazing museum you have in Florence, where you can see how he tries to find out how to construct this dome. And of course, again, there is a background to stage or to initiate something which looks like the sphere. And here you can see a very rich program of pictures to illustrate the stories of the Bible. I'd like to take you a few centuries later, and so we jump from the Renaissance right into the area of the Enlightenment in the end of the 18th century. This is a design made by Etienne Boullée. He and Claude Nicolas Ledoux were architects, so to speak, of the Revolution. We say it's a Revolution architecture. So it is not only of revolution, but it's also an utopian architecture. And Boullée tries to make a dome or a bowl with a diameter of more than 150 meters. Just remember, the Pantheon is 43.4 meters wide. Well, since Galileo Galilei and other scientists, it was clear that the world is not a plate and the sky is not a dome over the whole world, over the whole plate. We know that we are living on a bowl, so to speak, on the planet Earth, which is in the company of more planets. And what Etienne Boullée wants to achieve with his utopian design is to set a monument for Isaac Newton, one of the most important scientists in this way. He wants to create a cenotaph for him. And a cenotaph is something like an empty grave. There is no coffin inside, but it is still a monument. And he designs his building as a bowl. You can see it in the section. And he wants to make some holes inside so that the light comes in, and he is projecting, so to speak, the sky with the stars. And of course, this is an utopian project because it's not that easy to project the sky into a bowl. We can see it in the later project I'd like to show you. But the amazing thing is just to have the idea to project the sky into a building, into an artificial building, into an artificial sky or an artificial sphere. So one time the utopian architecture is not worth, because it's thinking about possibilities and chances and opportunities to realize further building. At that time, the possibilities and the capacity to construct such a building didn't exist. But let us take a look a few centuries later, in the early 20th century. Well, perhaps you can see the line we are following from the Pantheon over the Hagia Sophia, the mosque by Mimar Sinan, and the domes for St. Peter and for the dome in Florence, that it is became a theme in the architecture to project the sky for mystic or religious reasons. Now the Boule project was something first of scientific research. Well, at that time, in the early 20th century, engineers developed a machine to project the stars and the sky into a dome. And for a moment we'll leave the history of architecture and go into the history of optic machines. So the machine projects small images, small pictures on the dome, and the problem is, how can you divide, how can you measure the dome? Is it possible to do it in a normal thing? So you divide it, for example, in hexagon or pentagon things. So if you take a look at one of the sketches the engineers took, you can see that they divided the sphere into hexagons and pentagons. The idea is to project not only the sky, but to project the surface of the Earth into a dome. It's the old theme of architecture as we saw it, which mankind is following for centuries. So the background is to construct a surface for the sky projection. So the engineer Bauersfeld transformed this pentagon-hexagon geometry in a three-angle structure. And the three-angle structure they constructed out of steel elements. They wanted to create not only a projection for the projector, they wanted to create nothing else than a planetarium in the year 1926 in Jena. And you see the planetarium on the postcards and on the right hand side. So the idea is to project the sky, and the building is just following the use, and so they try to find a construction to use it for these technical projections. And the background is how to come to this geometry, and Bauersfeld found a very simple idea to base it on a triangle structure. How to get from this steel structure of a dome, you can see the people are climbing on it, and it's almost very stable, and how to achieve to get a building. And the idea behind it is to spray the concrete on this structure. You can see a modern building, contemporary picture on the right hand side, where a guy is spraying the fluid concrete on a structure of steel. So they achieved to get a very thin shell of concrete. We come to later to this kind of construction in a later lecture, but here we have the example of how to create a dome to project the world, nothing else but to project the world or to project the sky. And this is what you can call a private sky. The term of a private sky actually belonged to another guy, to Mr. Buckminster Fuller. He is also someone who's like a genius of the architecture of geodesy and of design. So he developed a very similar structure, as you can see on the picture there, and at least he came to the same end as Bauersfeld. But he started not from the idea to have a projection of the sky. He wanted nothing more than to remeasure or to measure the world. He developed a network to project the whole Earth in 2 dimensions, as you can see in the pictures above, and you see him holding a globus which comes out of his measurement. So here you can see how the projection or the transformation of the lines are going into 2 dimensions, and in the following film I show you how this can happen. So the basis of this theory were mainly squares and three angels. For him, this was the basis to design, to construct a new construction for new buildings, and at least to design new balls, new globes, or even just a new kind of architecture, as you can see in this example of his pavilion for the World Exhibition in Montreal, which is an existing huge building. But Buckminster Fuller was not enough for Buckminster Fuller, for Bucky Buckminster Fuller. And for example, he designed an utopian project to cover a part of Manhattan. So this private sky, and this is a name made by Buckminster Fuller, had a really huge dimension. So imagine a part of Manhattan could be under a roof, could be under a dome. So then you really have a new sky, a new private sky, and well, this is something what really tries to change the world. Fortunately or unfortunately, this building or this project was never realized. The ideas of creating domes or private skies were worldwide very popular. And as in the beginning of the 1960s, were a competition to construct a huge swimming hole with 50 meters swimming bassins. In Hamburg, the architect Werner Kahl had the idea to construct a dome, which was, I think, very much related to the idea of Buckminster Fuller. In spite, he just used another system. But let me show you some pictures of his design. Here you can see the cupola or the dome beside a huge building for services. The dome in this design were based on three angles, like Buckminster Fuller and Bauersfeld designed the first domes in this system. A later version of these construction, he used a hexagon structure for the cupola, but at least his design was not successful. He won a special prize in this competition, and at least none of these contributions were realized, and the now existing swimming hole is also very interesting construction. You can see it here in this image. But this is not more our theme. I come back later to these kind of constructions and the spaces resulting out of this construction in a later lecture. Yes, in the year 1998 there was an American film on the screens and in the cinemas called The Truman Show, and The Truman Show has a story of a guy played by Jim Carrey, who lived under a dome, under a private sky, but he didn't know that. For him, it felt real. It was the real world, and on the outside, all people can watch the television on his life. And once he got doubts, and then he explored the world. He took his boat and sailed to the edges of the world, and then he touched the sky. And that reminds me on the construction of Buckminster Fuller for Manhattan, or on the picture or the image we saw in the beginning of the lecture. Poor guy reached the end of the world and touched the sky and was very unlucky to find the outside of his world. So we are back in the Middle Ages, and we are back at the beginning of this lecture, and I'm just can say thank you for listening. Have a good time. See you next time.